One of the biggest confusions that most beginner podcasters face with is in picking the right genre for their podcast. Now, from true crime to fiction, there are a variety of podcast types to pick from. While some of these genres are more popular than the other, every genre has a space in the podcastosphere. In this video, we are going to look at the 10 top and the most popular type of podcasts, why these genres are popular, and also look at some of the most popular shows in each of these genres. Hello and welcome to TPU TV. This is Dilip. I am the host of the Podcasting University, a podcaster, a blogger, and an affiliate marketer. Now, in this channel, I talk about podcasts and podcasting tips. So if you're new to this channel here, then you might want to subscribe to this channel and click the bell notification in order to stay updated with the latest episodes that I come out with. And if you're planning to start your podcast, then you are at the right place. I have a lot of helpful videos on getting started with your podcast on this channel. Go ahead and watch the one that you find the most relevant for your problem. Now, on to today's video, podcasting genre. Now, just as in any other audiovisual medium, podcast also has a variety of genres to pick from, both as a listener and as a creator. Now, as a listener, this might be a little simple because you like some specific genres and you can pick those podcasts and give it a listen. But as a creator, if you have to pick a genre for your podcast, then there are a few questions that you need to answer. Like, for example, one, which genre is the most popular, which has the most number of audience, which genre is better, etc., etc. While there is no single genre that is more popular than the other, there are some genres that have more listenership. But then the decision that you need to take is, do you want to get into a market or a genre that is overcrowded or extremely crowded? Or do you want to get into something where there is less amount of competition? In order to help you with that decision, in this video, I have the 10 top types of podcasts, and we'll also be looking at why these genres are popular and also some of the most popular shows in each of these genres. So let's get started. Number 1, true crime podcast. The first on our list is true crime podcast. Now, true crime podcast is usually based on real crimes and discusses these cases in much detail. And these shows usually have interviews with witnesses who were at the receiving end of these crimes. Now, why this specific genre is extremely popular is because these podcasts give a unique perspective or a different perspective to these cases, a different perspective that hasn't been discussed a lot about these cases. So these podcasts are extremely interesting and generates a lot of inquisitiveness in the audience. Some of the most popular podcasts in this genre are Drilled, Dirty John, and Serial. There might be a lot many other as well, but these are some of the most popular podcasts in this genre. Number 2, business podcast. Now, the second type of podcast is business podcast, and business podcasts usually give you a behind the scenes view of what happens in some of the most successful businesses. And it also usually gives you tips on how to succeed with starting a business. Now, these type of podcasts usually include interviews from entrepreneurs or people who are running these businesses or successful people who built a business from scratch and so on. So it's in a way inspirational and also give you a lot of information or tips on getting started with your podcast. Some of the most popular business podcasts are How I Built This, The Tim Ferriss Show, and Business Wars. Now, these three are my favorite podcasts in this genre. Number 3, self-improvement podcast. Now, this third type of podcast is basically about self-improvement. They too usually feature interviews with experts in the field of psychology, productivity, wellness, etc. Now, these kind of podcasts give you tips and advices on how to be more productive, how to lead a life that you always wanted to, how to reach your goals, etc. So these are pretty motivational in nature and it can help you achieve your goals. And that's one of the primary reasons why these kind of podcasts are extremely popular. Now, some of the popular shows in this genre are The School of Greatness, the Tony Robbins podcast, and Oprah's Super Soul Conversations. Now, these are extremely interesting podcasts that motivate you to go and achieve your goals. So if you're looking at starting a podcast in such a genre, then you might want to look at running it in the format of an interview podcast. Number 4, comedy podcast. Now, comedy podcasts usually take two different approaches. One is where they interview comedians and stand-up comedians and comedic actors and give you a lot of perspective into behind the scenes of these personalities or behind the scenes of their lives. Now, the second approach that a lot of comedy podcasts do is they run these weekly episodes on stand-up comedies. So they do these small comedy routines and serve you as an entertainment. Now, both of these are extremely popular. One for people who are looking at maybe knowing what happens in the lives of these comedians or these comedy actors, and number two for people who want to spend some time laughing or maybe enjoying their life. So both these formats are extremely popular in the comedy podcast. And some of the most popular shows in this genre is WTF with Mark Maron and Comedy Bang Bang. There are a lot of other podcasts as well, but these two are my favorites. Number 5, sports podcast. Sports podcasts usually take two different formats. The first one is where you interview sports personalities or experts, sports experts, and talk about different sports. That is one format that a lot of people run the podcast in. The second format is where you talk about a specific event. Like, for example, there are a lot of cricket-based podcasts where the podcasters or the host is usually talking about a specific tournament or a specific match or a specific event in a specific match. So that looks a little more in detail into that specific event or that specific tournament or that specific match. But the other format is primarily in terms of motivation or inspiration, where we get a chance to look at the behind the scenes of these sporting personalities. Both these formats are extremely popular sports type of podcasts, and whatever it is that you prefer to start off with, you can get started off with. There are a lot of popular shows in the sports format, like for example, the Bill Simmons podcast, Cricket Bazi, and Pardon My Take. Now, like what I said, there could be other podcasts as well, but these are the three podcasts that I usually listen to in the sports type of podcast. Number 6, news podcast. Now, news podcast again has two different formats. If you're looking at running it in the interview format, you would usually interview journalists or feature experts on current affairs, talk to them about the latest news and things like that. And the second format is where you give a gist of whatever has happened in a specific day to your audience, maybe in about 5-10 minutes. That is for people who don't want to spend or who are not able to find time to go and watch the latest news. So both these formats are extremely popular in the news type of podcast. And whatever it is that you pick, you might want to decide on the frequency of the podcast depending upon the format. Because if you're going to run an interview podcast, you can always do it in a weekly frequency. But if you're going to run it in the form of a news synopsis format, then you might want to run it as a daily podcast. Some of the most popular podcasts in this genre include The Daily, The American Life, and The Radio Lab. Now, there are a lot many other podcasts as well. So depending upon what your choice or what your choice of news is, you might find a lot of podcasts in this format. Number 7, interview podcast. Now, this is one of the most popular type of podcasts. And interview podcasts are usually inspirational in nature. And the objective of these podcasts is to inspire people. So they bring in a lot of different personalities from different walks of life into their show, interview them, and get a sneak peek into their real life or behind the scenes of their life. In that way, these podcasts attempt to inspire people to reach their goals, lead a life that they've always wanted to, or to help them with their personality. Interview podcasts are extremely popular, but you need to put in a lot of effort in getting the guests on the show. And then you also have to have the knack of asking the right questions so that you're able to get valuable content out of your guests. Now, some of the most popular shows in this genre is The Joe Rogan Experience, The Tim Ferriss Show, and WTF with Mark Maron. Number 8, history podcast. Now, this is one of my favorite genres in podcasting. Now, these type of podcasts again has two different formats. You can either take the interview format or a solo format. Now, the interview formats are usually with historians, archaeological experts, or experts in the field of history, and they give you a different perspective to history than what you've always known about. That's why this format is extremely popular in the history genre. Now, the second format is a solo episode that you can run. Maybe you can pick a lot of these incidents that would have happened in the past, in history, and then talk about it, give your perspective to what that incident was, or give a narration about what actually happened. So this format is again popular with a lot of people who are interested in learning more about history. But both of these formats are popular, so whatever it is that you want to run with, whatever it is that you're comfortable with, you can always go and start your podcast around that. Some of the most popular podcasts in this genre are The History Chicks, Stuff You Missed in History Class, and The Bowery Boys. Number 9, fiction podcast. Number 9, fiction podcast. Now this is another very popular genre in podcast. Now these type of podcasts are usually based on stories and novels and involve a lot of production quality, because there is a lot of background music and a lot of effort that is put in to make that story narration extremely pleasing to the ears. Some of these fiction podcasts also include interviews with the author or the writer of that novel or that story that is being narrated in that episode. What makes them so popular is that they offer a completely different listening experience to the audience. And like what I said, they usually have high production value, a lot of music and sound effects to give the listeners a completely different and immersive listening experience. Some of the most popular podcasts in this genre are The Indian Noir, The Black Tapes, and The Bright Sessions. Number 10, music podcast. Now, music podcasts are very few. You won't find a lot of podcasts in this genre, but this genre again has two different formats. One is where people teach music, and the second one is where people interview a lot of these musicians and experts in the field of music to give them behind the scenes look at the lives of these musicians. Sometimes these podcasts also offer commentary on the latest musical trends and talk about a lot that is happening in the world of music. So for people who are unable to catch all of these updates on the television, this genre is extremely popular and people like to tune into these kind of podcasts. But then you have to put in a lot of effort into these kind of podcasts in order to make it interesting for people to tune in. Some of the most popular shows in this genre are Switched on Pop, All Songs Considered, and Song Exploder. So those were the 10 most popular types of podcasts or podcast genres, with some of the most popular podcasts in each of these categories. Now, which out of these is your favorite genre? What is the podcast that you like listening? Comment below and let me know. I would like to listen to it. And while we are here, I would like to invite you to tune into our podcast, the Tastes of India podcast, which is probably the only recipe podcast in India where we talk about a recipe and also some extremely interesting motivational stories. You'll be able to find a link to the Tastes of India podcast in the description box below. Go ahead and give it a listen and do let me know your thoughts about that podcast. Now, if you haven't listened to the Podcasting University, then that is a show that I run. That show is everything about podcasts and podcasting. I interview experts there. I bring in a lot of podcasters who are successful in podcasting, and I also share a lot of podcasting tips there as well. So you'll be able to find a link to that podcast in the description box below. Go ahead and subscribe to the show and give it a listen in there. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, then do that right away. Don't forget to press the bell notification so that you stay updated with the latest videos that I come out with. And if you like this video, then give this video a thumbs up. That will give me a lot of motivation to create more such videos. That is all that I have for this video. I'll be back again the next week with another interesting piece on podcasting. Until then, keep watching TPU TV.